Well, Dash, I can smell the fantasy playoffs from here. Smells like victory.
Welcome to the Steel City. Is everybody ready to go? Let's proclaim the greatest radio show.
Welcome, fans, to another episode of The Spread. I'm your host, Jim Sella, in studio with the one and only J Dash. Dash, you haven't hated on me, and you've been here for like an hour and a half. I think that's a record.
I hated on you to your dog, Haley.
Oh, well, nobody cares about Haley.
Everybody loves Haley.
We do love Haley. It's all right, fish.
But yeah, now's the time you want to win. Look, if you're 3-7 right now and you win out, go 6-7 by the end of the season, there's still a possibility you squeak into that number 6 seed if your league does take 6 teams into the playoffs.
I'll tell you what, in the pay league that I'm in, it's 2 divisions, 10 teams. 3 people in my division are 8-2. 1 person in the other division is 8-2. It's a logjam.
Beast mode. I'm 9-1 in my one league and right in the middle of it at 5-5 in the other.
JK47's leading our spread league at 9-1, is he not?
Yes, he is.
Let's sabotage him.
Let's move into situational starters for this week, though. Who are you going with?
I'm going to go with wide receiver Tavon Austin from St. Louis. You could call me crazy. It doesn't matter. They're going up against the Baltimore Ravens. They're giving up the second most fantasy points to wide receivers this year. There's been a change at quarterback. Nick Foles is out. Case Keenum's in. You're hearing Foles is injured. I'm hearing he was just garbage. But they did sign him to that extension. So Jeff Fisher said that the future is still bright for Foles, even though he was benched in place of Case Keenum. But Keenum did well. I think it was Houston that he played in last.
Yeah.
And he put up points. I mean, he's not going to win a lot of games.
He was terrible at the end, though. Terrible.
But he could chuck it. And, I mean, come on. Everybody's throwing the ball well against Baltimore this year, so.
Yeah, Tavon Austin had just 3 points last week versus Chicago, but before that, he had 5 straight double-digit fantasy performances. And last week, like I said, just 3 points, but he did have a 17-yard rushing touchdown called back as well. Case Keenum in. It looked like Nick Foles was starting to find chemistry with Tavon Austin. Now, you bring in a new quarterback, you think maybe that chemistry isn't there, but Tavon Austin has been making plays. And really, they've been using him on the ground, too, to spell Todd Gurley a little bit. So he's going to get some rushes. I believe they're going to throw him some screens, too. So he's going to get targets. He's going to get touches in his game. It just all depends on what he's going to do with those touches. And the way Baltimore's pass defense plays, I could see him breaking a big one.
They're probably going to have a lot of short passes, especially early in the game, to try to get Keenum into a rhythm. You know what I mean? So maybe Austin catches a screen pass and takes it deep, gets a touchdown.
Couple other receivers you could consider this week as situational starters. Marvin Jones at Arizona. Now, Arizona, they do have a good pass defense. They let up the 13th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers this season. But everything I've been reading about him, he's expected to see a very good matchup. In fact, the best matchup in his game versus Gerard Powers. And he has 40 targets over his last 5 games. That's 8 targets per game, and he has 3 double-digit fantasy performances in that span. So while A.J. Green might have a hard time out there, Andy Dalton may look Marvin Jones' way a little bit more in this game.
The Bengals are going down.
Yeah, I think the Bengals are going to lose this week, too. Another guy, Doug Baldwin versus San Francisco.
WB.
San Francisco, they led up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. Baldwin actually started the season with double-digit fantasy points in 4 of his first 5 games, so he started off very well. Then he followed that with 3 straight weeks with 6 points or less before going into the bye. Now, coming out of the bye versus Arizona last week, he had 7 receptions on 10 targets, 134 yards, and a touchdown. He actually had 1 less target in the last 2 games, which was 16, than he had in his previous 5 games, which was 17. So he's being targeted a lot more recently, and it looks like Russell Wilson may go back to Doug Baldwin as his favorite target in this offense, just like he has been the past couple years.
Seahawks just can't figure out how to use Jimmy Graham.
I'm going to go with a quarterback, though. I'm going to say Matt Stafford this week. He started off terrible this season, but he's been up and down pretty much all season long. He went out last week and played pretty well versus Green Bay. In Green Bay, nonetheless, had 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. And really, over the last 4 games, he has 9 touchdowns and 1,120 yards passing. Now, he's going up against Oakland this week, and they have trouble against the pass this season. If you remember, though, Oakland was really good at stopping the run up until these past 2 weeks versus the Steelers and Minnesota. And Detroit can't really run the ball very well. I think Oakland gets back on track and is able to stop the run, but they're not able to stop this passing game with Matt Stafford out there.
Amir Abdullah had a big day on special teams this past week.
How about sleepers?
Sleeping it up with Alex Smith. He's going up against the Chargers. They give up the 13th most points to fantasy quarterbacks. I actually almost picked up Alex Smith. I have Ben Roethlisberger on a bye this week, and Peyton Manning's complete garbage. San Diego, they're going to throw the ball a lot, so it's going to probably be a high-scoring game. Kansas City's offense is actually starting to show a little bit of life, I guess. As a team, there's not really like a dominant player. Charkandrick West is dominant out of the backfield, but Jeremy Macklin's fallen off a little bit the last few weeks.
Travis Kelce hasn't been himself either, really.
Yeah, so it seems to me Smith is kind of just moving the ball and splitting it up amongst all his weapons, so nobody's getting one single guy. No one single guy is getting all the targets, but Alex Smith is throwing all the footballs, and Kansas City's playing better football. He should be able to get points. San Diego's garbage this year. What are they, 2-8?
Yeah, they're terrible.
Horrible.
But look, Alex Smith has actually been good in fantasy over the past 2 months pretty much. He has 18 or more fantasy points in 6 of his last 7 games. He hasn't thrown a pick since week 3. And look at what he does on the road. At least 31 pass attempts in all 5 road games, and he only has 1 pick in those games. So he plays pretty well on the road, and they throw a lot on the road too. And San Diego, just not that great of a defense.
They're garbage.
I'm going to go with wide receiver Ted Ginn Jr. from Carolina. He's going up against Washington this week. They led up the 14th most points to fantasy wide receivers this season. He has 30 targets over his last 4 games and is the number 1 wide receiver out there in Carolina. Now, he's the number 2 option behind Greg Olsen, obviously. But if you look, in 6 of his last 9 games, he has at least 9 or more fantasy points, and this is one of his better matchups over the past several weeks. And I think he's going to get it going this week. We remember Washington from last week. They somewhat shut down Drew Brees. I think, honestly, that Carolina has a better offense than the New Orleans Saints actually do, even though Drew Brees had those big games.
Yeah, Devin, get the Funchess out of here, isn't doing what everybody thought he was going to be able to do this year. So
solid game,
Ted Ginn is definitely the number 1 receiver out of there, although you're right, Olsen's the number 1 target. I've liked Teddy Ginn in that offense. It's the only time I felt like his time in the NFL where he's really fit in. No, he's not going to, light the world on fire or anything, but he's going to get you some points, and that's what a sleeper does.
Well, I was talking about Matthew Stafford in the situational starter segment. Another Detroit line you can look at here as a sleeper. And that really, it's surprising he is a sleeper to me. He's not owned by many teams. You could probably go out and pick this guy up still. Eric Ebron versus Oakland this week. They led up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends. And like I said, I don't think Detroit's going to be able to run the ball very well this week. They're going to be passing a lot. And Eric Ebron, you look, he did only have 4 catches for 28 yards last week, but he still had 8 targets, and he started the season with 3 double-digit fantasy performances, got injured in Game 4, missed the following 2 games, and then came back and had 5 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown in his first game versus Minnesota. And really, over the past 2 weeks, he actually hasn't been playing pretty well. So he's still available in about 70% of the leagues. You could probably go pick him up. This is his best matchup in weeks, and I think he's going to have a nice bounce back here.
Has Calvin Johnson been reduced from Megatron to Minitron, fantasy-wise?
He's still a great receiver. All they have to do is double him. They have no run game. They don't really have a stud second receiver. I know Golden Tate isn't that bad out there, but all they have to do is double Calvin Johnson, and they're passing pretty much. So it's tough for him, but I think he's still a beast.
He's just not beating people over the top like he used to.
It's tough, man.
30-something years old and you're that big, your knees start to hurt.
Don't forget, Matt Stafford's having a down season, too. I know
he's having a down 2 seasons.
He's played a little bit better over the past month or so, but really, if Matt Stafford was playing better, if they had a second receiver that you could trust more, they had a run game, I think Calvin Johnson would be just fine right now.
If you have to give Stafford's career a thumbs up or thumbs down, what would you give it so far?
Oh, thumbs down. I thought this guy was going to be a beast ever since he came in the league.
Believe it.
All right, let's move on to deep sleepers.
I'm going with Easy's favorite player in the world besides Darren Sproles, Dexter McCluster. He's going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is a Thursday night game, so if you're agreeing with me, you got to make sure you get this in early. Jacksonville ranks 24th against the pass this year. They're giving up the 7th most points to fantasy running backs. Duck McCluck can get it done both ways, in the pass, out of the backfield. Tennessee needs to find something to do. I mean, Mariota needs a weapon. He hasn't found that one guy. I know Duck McCluck's not going to be a franchise guy and carry your team or anything, but he can help you win a football game, especially against the Jaguars, who seem to keep losing games in the fourth quarter.
Well, he was the only player to score against Carolina last week. Kendall Wright and Justin Hunter are both not healthy right now, so Duck McCluck may be used more in the passing game than usual. He may be one of the top targets out there this week. And really, if your league counts return yardage, he's been good all season long. Not great, but he's been okay. Look, double-digit fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 weeks if you count that return yardage, and obviously PPR.
Get some.
I'm going to go with wide receiver from Buffalo, Robert Woods at New England. Now, you know New England, they should be scoring a lot of points in this game, obviously, and they're not that great against wide receivers this season. They let up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers, and Robert Woods actually had a touchdown against New England in week 2. 3 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown, so that is a good game for him. And if you look over his last 4 games, he has at least 6 targets in 3 of those games. The high in that span was 13 targets. Now, over the past couple weeks, he hasn't been doing much, but I really see New England going ahead and Buffalo really having to pass in this game. That doesn't mean McCoy isn't going to have a good game. He could still have a good game, but I think they're going to need more than just Sammy Watkins in the passing game to even try to keep up with New England in this game.
New England's good at shutting down a team's number 1 receiver. Maybe not completely, but they take him out of the equation more than other teams. Even when New England has a bad defense, just Belichick knows how to scheme if you're trying to beat them with one player. So there's no way Sammy Watkins is going to be able to go off for, 160, 200 yards. He's going to get doubled up. He's going to get jammed and pushed around at the line, so he may get frustrated. Woods could actually end up having the bigger day.
Or Chris Hogan, your boy.
Brother.
Another wide receiver you could go with. I'm going to stick with Detroit here. Lance Moore versus Oakland.
Block that dude.
They're not very good against wide receivers.
Gave up on the Steelers.
Okay, but look, double-digit fantasy performances in 4 of his last 5 games, and he has 4 TDs in every one of those games he did get double digits. So he's been fine in the end zone recently. Like I said before, Oakland, they had trouble stopping the run the past 2 games, but they were one of the best in the league before these 2 games against Pittsburgh and Minnesota. But I really think Detroit's run game is garbage, and Oakland's going to get back on track versus the run, and Detroit's just going to have to pass more. And Lance Moore, he's been fine in the end zone recently. He's been targeted more over the past month. I don't see why he can't have another good game here, especially versus a defense that hasn't been able to stop the pass all season.
Nice to see he remembers where the end zone is. Loser.
One last guy here. How about a tight end? I may be cheating a little bit here. You could consider this guy a sleeper or maybe even a situational starter at this point. Crockett Gilmore, he's going up against St. Louis. They do a good job at stopping the run. They do a good job at stopping receivers. They're mediocre at stopping tight ends, and we know Joe Flacco, he has Kamar Aiken out there. He has Chris Givens out there, and Crockett Gilmore really going to be one of his top targets. Seeing that St. Louis, the position they have the biggest problem against is tight end, I could see Crockett Gilmore coming out and have a decent week. You look, he scored a touchdown each of the past 2 weeks, and like I said before, he is playing a bigger role with Steve Smith out.
I'm pretty sure I heard Brashard Perriman went on IR too for Baltimore.
Oh yeah, Brashard Perriman, he's not coming back.
So he definitely does.
We'll have to see about Max Williams too. He may get more involved.
He caught a touchdown pass the other day, didn't he?
Yeah.
This week or last week?
Yes. They got to get these guys more involved somehow. They got to find a passing game for Joe Flacco.
Losing Steve Smith hurt them. Not that they had much in front of them already this year, but
Steve Smith, in 10 years, when you say Steve Smith, what are you going to picture? Carolina?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Screw Baltimore.
That's what I say.
I see him with that mean face. Show me your mean face. Running down the field, catching touchdowns from Jake Delhomme.
I always picture him rowing about.
I see him in a tuxedo t-shirt looking like Jesus fighting ninjas. Anything else as far as fantasy goes?
No.
Fans, any fantasy questions, ideas, comments, hit us up on Twitter at bet_the_spread. Hit me up on Twitter at betjimthewin. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/betthespread. Keep coming back to YouTube and click and subscribe. Throw some comments. Did we get any comments in our fantasy episodes last week?
Yeah, one from me.
What did it say?
I forget.
Great comment.
No, James Stark. It was about James Starks overtaking Eddie Lacy. That's what it was.
I think I posted that.
You're dead wrong.